right now. Scott Wright, DraftCountdown.com. Thanks to Sal Powell for jumping on at Sal Powell ESPN on Instagram. Follow him there for another Sal Powell Friday. Thanks to him, of course, on these Fridays, getting us ready for the draft. But Scott Wright, DraftCountdown.com. Let's get into it now because I know locally there's a lot of people scratching their heads, and I want to get your take first. I know your mock draft had Jalen Reagor going 48 to the Jets. That's not going to happen because he went 21 to the Eagles, Scott. How surprised were you when they made that pick, especially with Justin Jefferson on the board, Kenneth Murray on the board, but the pick was Reagor? What's your thoughts?
I was surprised that they didn't take Justin Jefferson just because I had heard that they really liked him. But I think it's clear the Eagles were looking for something specific on offense that Justin Jefferson wasn't going to give them. They wanted that speed. They wanted that explosiveness, that big playability. And after Henry Ruggs, Reagor was kind of the next of the top group of receivers who had that skill set. Now, over the years, I've learned to be a lot more generous with what I call a reach. Because, there aren't 32 picks in every draft. Usually by the time you get into the 20s, you're talking about guys with second-round grades. So there's very little difference between, the 25th and the 45th pick value-wise. So was it a reach for the Eagles? I think it was, but it wasn't particularly glaring or egregious. But I think it's just clear that was the type of player they wanted, and they were going to do what they had to make sure they got him. So it's exactly what the Eagles need for that offense. He's just rough around the edges. He's probably a little better athlete than football player at this point, but he is explosive, 4.4 speed. He's a great leaper and some untapped potential because his quarterback play didn't really help him out that much this past year. So there's a lot to like about Jalen Reagor. That was definitely the high end of the range for him, and it was one of the surprises of the first round, but not the most egregious reach.
Jefferson, let's kind of compare. What do these guys do differently that maybe you could see why the Eagles would have said, this is why we took him over Jefferson? Do they have different skill sets that you would say, well, if they are looking for this particular skill set, Reagor would be the guy that you would go with in that spot?
Yeah, absolutely. Very different types of players. Even though Jefferson technically ran faster at the combine than Reagor did, Reagor's just so much more explosive and dynamic of an athlete. So I think, he's going to give you more of that downfield ability, that ability to create after the catch and make big plays, whereas Justin Jefferson, his game is about polish. He's a really good route runner. He can work inside, outside. His value, I think, is in his all-around ability. So no question, very different types of players. And I think that's why Reagor got the nod over Jefferson, because he just offers something completely different that Jefferson just doesn't. Jefferson's a very good player, but he doesn't offer the skill set that Reagor does.
You see, in today's NFL, a lot of times when you think about receivers, I think one thing that fans get locked in on, Scott, is the old big-time number one wide receivers, the Julio Jones, the DeAndre Hopkins, the big physical guy. Now you see Antonio Brown, 5'10", under 200 pounds, Tyreek Hill, under 6 foot. You're seeing that smaller guys are finding their way, and you wonder if the Eagles are trying to kind of emulate what Kansas City is doing with the smaller, speedier receivers.
I think that absolutely played a role. And we saw Henry Ruggs III was the first wide receiver off the board last night for the Raiders, and there was speculation that John Gruden wanted him because he envisioned Ruggs being his version of Tyreek Hill. So I think it's a similar type of situation for the Eagles. And you're right. And, you don't have to necessarily be these freakish physical specimens like Calvin Johnson or A.J. Green or Julio Jones to be this true number one wide receiver in the NFL. And I think teams are a lot more open, and teams have always valued speed, but more so than ever. And I think the success that Tyreek Hill has absolutely helped both Ruggs and Jalen Reagor on draft day.
Yeah, and obviously the next pick was Jefferson, and then Kenneth Murray right there behind him. So they had Howie Roseman certainly had a scenario come up that he probably had to think some things out before he made that pick. I don't know that he thought he was going to be in that spot, but obviously he liked Reagor better than Jefferson, and you wonder, what did taking the receiver last night at 21 possibly tell us about tonight?
Yeah, and it worked out pretty good for the Eagles. They had some good options there at 21. It's not like a run on players that they wanted were gone. I mean, Jefferson was there if they wanted him. Murray was there if they wanted him, like you said. So they obviously really liked Reagor. And I too, would find it fascinating to hear those discussions and hear what the thought process was. But now Philly got their receiver. Everybody knew that's something they desperately needed. So now I think, we talked about linebacker, and I didn't think they were going to go Murray in the first round, but I think they can get a good linebacker in the second round here now tonight. So I think that's definitely an area that they're going to emphasize, whether we'll see what pick they do it with. So I think that definitely stands out. Maybe some more help for the secondary. That's something, safety. We didn't have any safeties taken in the first round last night, so we're going to see a run on them tonight. I think we're going to see probably 7 safeties go in the second and the third round, and there isn't a lot of consensus on the pecking order. This guy's 1, this guy's 2, this guy's 3. I think depending on what you're looking for and what each team values, they're going to have them stacked differently. So, that's a position where I think we could see some surprises tonight. But if Philly wants to get a safety on day 2, I think they're going to be pretty well set up, especially in the second round.
What about I want to go back to what happened with CeeDee Lamb, and when he was there at 16 and Atlanta's on the board. Are you thinking to yourself, wow, Philadelphia's in play for something here? I mean, how he addressed it last night just basically said they gave up draft capital for Slay. They didn't want to give up any more. But was that an area where you thought Philly could have been in play?
I thought so. When CeeDee Lamb kept dropping and when he got into striking range for the Eagles, I would have been surprised if they had moved into the top dozen picks for. But when he was available in the latter part of the teams there, it sure would have made a lot of sense. And to me, one of the biggest surprises of the whole first round is that the Atlanta Falcons didn't move, mostly up, but even down. There was so much talk that the Falcons were trying to be aggressive, and they have a track record that they usually get something done when there's a player that they're targeting, but they wound up standing pat. So that, to me, that was one of the biggest surprises of the first round, and I think they reached a little bit to address a corner. And, that's the thing, too. Some corners got pushed up, some wide receivers got pushed up. But yeah, I was a little surprised because the Eagles have been known to be aggressive. If there's a guy they're targeting, CeeDee Lamb. But there again, CeeDee Lamb, he would not have been necessarily a fit. If the Eagles were looking for a player like Jalen Reagor, they weren't looking for a player like Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb. So I think that's really what it came down to. If Reagor was the type of player they're looking for, the guy they probably would have traded up for is Ruggs, I imagine.
Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. So your mock draft last night was virtually on the money for the first 9 picks except for 1. So the surprise could have been number 4. What did you think of the Giants taking the tackle Thomas? You had them taking a tackle, but a different one. I think the rest of the 9 picks up to, did you have the Browns pick? No, because Thomas is where you had.
Different offensive tackle, yep.
Yep, so you pretty much nailed the first 10, but the Giants messed you up.
Yeah, and even in that case, I just had the offensive tackles going to different teams. I had the teams taking offensive tackles, just different offensive tackles, and the same things for receivers. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with the way the mock draft came out. It was more accurate this year, and it was tough. And I didn't have a high degree of confidence going in, and ultimately what I decided to do with this mock draft is just not to overthink it. Just go with what makes sense. Don't try to find all these other scenarios. For example, Tua going to the Dolphins, things of that nature. So I kind of stuck with my gut, and it worked out pretty well. So, and I'm a little surprised because I thought it was going to be a really unpredictable draft, but it kind of went the way we thought, with the exception of 2-3 guys who maybe came up the board a little earlier than expected. We talked about Jalen Reagor. I think Damon Arnett, the cornerback from Ohio State, going 19 overall. To me, that was definitely a reach. I don't think there's any question about that. But there's another case. The Raiders didn't have a second-round pick. They're desperate for a cornerback, so they took the one they liked the best. And then Jordan Brooks going to the Seahawks towards the end of the first round. That was earlier than expected. So, there were 3 or 4 surprises, but it wasn't as chaotic as I think most, including myself, expected.
Yep. And then what about the fact that Lamb went to Dallas? I mean, obviously, they don't have an extreme need for there, but were you surprised that they pulled the trigger on CeeDee Lamb at 17?
A little surprised that they didn't take K'Lavon Chasen. If we knew C.J. Henderson, the cornerback from Florida, who was the best fit, wasn't going to be available, and I thought Chasen might be a fit. But then, I mean, if Chasen and Henderson had both been gone, then the Cowboys were kind of in no man's land because the value didn't really fit their needs. But when CeeDee Lamb fell into the laps, everybody laughed yesterday when they saw that Jerry Jones wasn't going to be taking input from scouts during the draft. He was going to make the pick himself. So it kind of teed up, what is Jerry going to do? But made a pretty good pick, and it makes sense. Support Dak Prescott, and they'll take more pressure off and focus off that running game and help Zeke. And they certainly needed another pass catcher there. And I think the other thing, too, is, Amari Cooper, I think he's only signed for 2 more years. So, maybe they're preparing for the future. Maybe they weren't very happy with the way this offseason played out and having to pay Amari Cooper $20 million a year. Maybe this is a little bit too, looking down the line and saying, well, CeeDee Lamb, he's going to replace Amari Cooper in a couple of years rather than paying the exorbitant price for Cooper. So I think that probably played into it a little bit as well. But definitely, I don't think many people going into the draft thought the Cowboys were going to take a wide receiver. But when Lamb was there at 17, it just Jerry couldn't resist.
All right. How about, I guess, one of the other interesting stories was Green Bay trading up to get Love. And obviously a lot of conversation about the similarities to what happened in Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers got drafted.
Right, it's a circle of life, right? Aaron Rodgers can't be too angry because at one point he was Jordan Love. He was in this situation, so I think it was a good move for the Packers. I think I saw on Twitter, I can't remember who said it, but it was basically the worst time to take a quarterback is when you need one. Don't wait until you're desperate. Think ahead, and that's why I was a little surprised the Saints didn't take Jordan Love too. Jordan Love, he was good value. He was legitimately in conversations as early as 5 or 6 overall. So to get him late in the first round was good value. And it's a perfect situation for him because he's rough around the edges. He needs some time to develop. He needed to sit at least a year, and now he's going to get that opportunity to sit probably at least a couple of years, if not more. And it's going to give Jordan Love the best chance to be successful and maximize his immense potential. So I like that pick for the Packers. I can understand why Aaron Rodgers probably is less than enthralled with it, but they're going to get him a pass catcher on day 2. There's going to be wide receivers, and that's why you have a general manager. You have to keep an eye on the long-term interest of the organization, and the Packers did that again.
I was surprised to see that the last time they took a skill position player was, in fact, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I thought that was bonkers to see that. But give me a couple
of... taken some guys relatively early, like Greg Jennings was an early second, Devontae Adams. But, it's just not the Packers' MO to take a skill position player in the first round.
Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com, round 2 and 3. Couple guys that are on the board still that you're surprised by that you like tonight.
Nobody that I'm just blown away that is still available, but the offensive tackles. I thought we would see Josh Jones from Houston and Ezra Cleveland from Boise State go in the first round. I actually thought they might go in the top 20 overall. That would have been early for my taste, but just from what I was hearing, I thought they could get pushed up. So I think we're going to see those top blockers come off the board. I mean, the Bengals at number 33, the first pick, they need some blockers for Joe Burrow, so I think that would make a lot of sense. Running backs, we only had one running back come off the board, so I think we're going to see an early run on running backs, top half of the second round. I think we're going to see DeAndre Swift from Georgia, Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State, so it's going to be running back time. And then safeties, I talked about how there's no safeties off the board. So that's kind of some of the storylines I'm watching tonight, but day 2 was my favorite day of the draft by far. There's more than twice as many picks as round 1, and you're still talking about really, really good players. A lot of guys who were in the first-round conversation at one point and guys that are going to be expected to come in and start immediately and make big contributions for these teams. So day 2 is my favorite day of the draft.
Yeah, rounds 2 and 3, that's tonight. And then, of course, Saturday, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to close it all off. You can listen to the draft right here on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, in Scott's mock draft at 53. Ashton Davis, a safety from Cal, going to Philadelphia. And then they have a comp pick in round 3, and that is all the way down the end at 103. Logan Wilson, the linebacker from Wyoming. So that's where you think they would finally go linebacker. But you have said on the show in previous times on Scott that you wouldn't be surprised or be against the Eagles doubling up on wide receivers. So they took one at 21. Don't be surprised if they get one tonight at some either the second or third round.
I would not fault them at all. The need is there, and if any team understands how important it is to have depth at wide receiver, it's the Eagles after what happened to them last year. So I don't think they'll do in the second round, but that comp pick late in the third round, I would not fault them one bit for double dipping.
All right, plenty more on the draft Monday. We'll recap it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Scott Wright, follow him at Draft Countdown, of course, for all the updates on the NFL drafts round 2 and 3 here on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure.